Hi everyone, welcome back. So today we are going to talk about MCP server versus traditional APIs. Right. See, on the surface it looks like they both are same. So with API, let's say here we have API and here we have MCP. So same thing, you expose something, okay, and someone will call it and you will send the data back or they will get the data back. Okay, so this happens traditionally in the APIs. In MCP servers also, you expose tools, okay, and an AI agent will call it, we call it MCP client. Okay, so server will expose tools, client will call it, maybe request some data, and server will give them data, right? So the end result might seems identical, right? But even though the end result might seem identical, it is completely different. Especially how all this has been done is very different. So today we will be discussing couple of major differences between MCP server versus traditional APIs or API server, you can say. Okay, that is the agenda for today's video. And why I wanted to cover this in the very beginning is because this is very common confusion point that people who have been creating APIs from last couple of years will always feel confused that okay, what's the difference? Like, we have been already exposing all these things with the help of our standard APIs classes, or we were writing the web services to expose the classes. So what's new with this MCP? So that's what we will be trying to understand in this video. Okay, so let's say here we have API and here we have MCP. Talking about the differences, first difference is discoverability. When I say discoverability, I mean when you expose a REST API, the caller needs to know that this API exists before they can use it. Right? Someone has to read your documentation, someone has to understand your endpoint, someone has to write code to call that URL. Okay, with the right header, with the right forms, with the right body, everything has to be pre-decided. And every new caller needs to do the same set of steps, same process from scratch whenever you are going to expose an API. So with the, let's say for example, with the REST API, you have your caller and you have your Salesforce where you have exposed it. Caller needs to know everything in advance, like endpoints, request structure, header, OAuth details. Everything has to be decided in advance before writing anything. So someone from the client side will have to read your whole documentation, will understand each and everything about your API from that documentation, and then will write the custom code to make sure that they are able to call the API exposed by you. So discoverability is complex here because first it is pre-decided. You'll have to do a lot of manual things in order to be able to use that API. Now with the MCP, okay, MCP server does not require anything. Look, okay, so let's say you have Salesforce. Here, instead of exposing a class, what did you do? You exposed that API as a tool, okay, and then when I say you exposed the API as a tool, you basically made yourself as a MCP server. So instead of the custom endpoint, your MCP server will become the endpoints, and the list of tools will be the endpoints. Any client, let's say your client is Claude, any client will just need to make sure that you have MCP server and this client needs to be MCP compatible. Okay, the moment they are MCP compatible, all they need to do is to just hit the tools list. Okay, they will hit the tools list, and in this tools list they will be able to understand what are the services you have exposed. Okay, let's say you have exposed create account, create opportunity, create leads. Okay, so you have exposed all those things. They will get the list of tools, and then because this Claude has the LLM, okay, and this LLM is capable of natural language processing, it will be able to determine dynamically which API to call. This tool will have multiple services. Then, based on the natural language processing, this LLM model will be able to identify which API to call dynamically. So, nothing, and the moment it determines which API to call, then it will figure out what are the payloads, what are the headers, and all those things. Okay, so you are not giving any list in advance or anything in advance, it all happening dynamically. Okay, so you don't need to read any documentation, you do not need to hard code anything, you do not need to build your code based on any hard coded wiring. Okay, no code you need to write. All you need to make sure is that the server is there and the client is MCP enabled. The moment everything meets the criteria, they will be able to connect with the server without doing anything, without writing a single line of code. Okay, AI will figure it out at runtime, and every time it will do automatically. You do not need to tell them manually anything. Typically, you will give just a statement like create a new client for me with name ABC Corp, and the moment you give that, they will hit the server, they will hit the tool list, they will determine which API to call, they will determine that whether they need to create account or contact or opportunity or lead whatsoever. That all capability is based on the client's LLM model. So they will do all those processing within themselves and will determine dynamically. They need the list of tools available on the server, so that once they figure out they need to create a new account, they will be able to find, okay, what is the endpoint or what is the API or what is the service to create a new account, what it requires, and then they will try to see if they have everything in the statement or not. If not, they will kind of ask the follow-up question, otherwise they will create the account automatically in Salesforce. So discoverability is the first point related to the difference between the API and MCP server. Okay, and difference is not just the convenience, it is the difference between a system that requires a human to set up the system, that any API, versus a system that any API can use independently without any human involvement, right? So here in the MCP model, you do not need to do anything manually. Your server should be there, your client will be able to call the server, get the list of tool, and will determine which API or which service to call dynamically without writing a single line of code. That's a very powerful feature in my opinion. Okay, coming to the second feature, okay, or coming to the second difference, let's say. So decision making is a factor which clearly differentiate between them. Okay, sorry for my bad handwriting, guys. Let me try to do it properly. Okay, API versus MCP, we are talking about decision making. Okay, when a human or a traditional systems call your REST API, let's say, okay, they know the endpoints, they know the payload, they know the response, they know the header, everything before the call they need to know that. Okay, only then they will be able to call this. So all these things are well decided in advance before the actual call. Okay, with MCP the caller is an LLM model, right? It is going to be an AI agent. So the user says, okay, let's set up a new client named ABC, and the LLM will read your description, figures out that it means creating an account, decides the right parameter for it, and it all happens dynamically based on natural language processing. So that's what I was talking about in the previous step as well. No one will ever hard code anything like, okay, when someone says create a new client, it means creating an account. Okay, this all will happen in the LLM model dynamically. So AI will work it out all for you. Okay, a REST API cannot do this. Okay, it can only be called by someone when they already know exactly what to call and how to call. MCP is designed specifically for a world where the caller is reasoning in real time. Okay, not all things will be pre-decided in this world. When we are talking about the agentic era, everything is going to happen in the real time dynamically, and that is why this MCP is going to be the game changer for the AI agents. Okay, so decision making here is happening dynamically in MCP by an LLM model, or you can say by an agent, AI agent. Whereas in the traditional API, between client and server there will be exchange of documentation, exchange of everything. So like any typical integration project will have everything prepared in advance before actually starting to write the single line of code. So you need to know that the endpoint, you need to know everything before making the call out or before writing the code. So this all is hard coded static method, whereas in the MCP it all is going to be the dynamic one. Okay, so let's talk about the third point, which is compatibility. Okay, now REST API, we know that every REST API we build is custom. Okay, your auth may be today it is just the JWT. Tomorrow you decide to use the API key, or someone else, other client may decide to use any other API key, any other flow for the authentication and authorization. Your endpoint may follow your own naming convention, whereas the other system might not have same. Your request body will be different, your request, your error processing, error format, everything is going to be unique to you. Okay, so every new integration seems like a new project itself. You'll have to repeat whole things, like exchange the payload, see that whether the compatibility is there or not, and then with the other system you'll have to work very closely. So every new integration is more of a new project for you. Okay, you cannot reuse what you have already done with one project. So compatibility is the major issue. But with MCP is one standard. Auth is always going to be the OAuth 2.0. Tool discovery will always have the same process. Response is always going to be the same. Every time MCP server uh, works in the same way. So all you need to do is to just do the one time setup to expose your services as the tools in the MCP server, and then client will be able to call it. So new integration is not actually a new project, but just a very small additions, or just to see whether the client is compatible or not, or whether you have that services exposed or not. That's it. If it is done, you do not need to do anything in order to build a new integration. So compatibility with MCP is very smooth. Okay, whereas in the traditional APIs it is always going to be a struggle, and you'll have to create new integration projects again and again and do the same things again and again. So that's the major difference between MCP and API. And I'm no way demean any of the API thing. You know that the MCP is nothing. Under the hood, even MCP is also calling the APIs. We will talk about that as well. The fourth one is the orchestration. Okay, this is the important one. Okay, so AI can combine multiple tools across systems on its own. Let's say, for example, you say when a new lead gets created in Salesforce, you need to create a Jira ticket. You also need to send message on Slack. Now, if you have to build it custom, what you will do, you will expose your class to create a new lead. Okay, and any external system will call that endpoint. Lead will get created, and then in Salesforce you will do a call out to Jira endpoint to create a ticket, and after that you will do an integration with Slack, or you will do a call out to Slack to send message. Okay, everything is hard coded, hardwired, and you need to write the custom code. Now remember, you'll also have to handle all the errors, all the failures in between. You also need to take care of the sequencing. Like, you'll have to first create a ticket, then you need to call the Slack, and first your lead should be created in Salesforce. So everything is hard coded, hardwired, very difficult. With MCP, Claude can connect to SF server, Jira MCP server, and Slack MCP server. All you need to do is to just give one statement on the client saying create lead, create a ticket, and then send the message on Slack. So you just write your plain message in plain English language on Claude, and Claude will automatically decide that what are the services it needs to call, what is going to be the sequence of it, how to handle the error, how to change these jobs, and all those things Claude will do dynamically without you writing a single line of code. Okay, so that's a very powerful capability. Okay, so these are a couple of major differences. If we summarize all the differences we have discussed here, there are majorly four differences we have discussed, and it's not like these are the only four differences, but kind of major ones. First is discoverability, then we have decision making. Here AI is making the decision, the LLM model is making the decision. Compatibility. With the traditional APIs, you'll have to check the compatibility every time you'll have to do a new integration. But with MCP, it's one standard, one universal standard everywhere in the world. It works in the same way. And then orchestration. Here you'll have to take care of the orchestration on your own by creating the custom flow, custom API integrations and everything. Take care of the sequencing and everything on your own. Whereas in MCP, it all will be handled by the AI automatically. Okay. So these are the four major differences we have discussed here today. But to summarize everything, it is very important thing to remember that MCP server does not eliminate the APIs. Even in the many implementation, the MCP server is simply orchestrating and invoking existing APIs behind the scene. Okay, so when I say that, okay, create an account, so let's say Claude will decide, okay, they need to create an account. So they first try to fetch the list of tools from Salesforce, and then there will be multiple services Salesforce has exposed. Like, let's say there is a service called create account. So this is nothing but the API endpoint exposed by Salesforce. So at the end, even the MCP is also using the same API exposed by Salesforce, which even from the UI also, you when you click on create new account, you use, that is also nothing but those create account APIs only. So it's just a different way of doing things, because those AI agents cannot do things on screen. Salesforce, or with the help of MCP server, Salesforce has given them option to be able to do work or get the things done in Salesforce without even clicking on UI screens and all those. So behind the scene, this create account is working even when a human is creating an account, versus even when the AI agent is creating an account, it is working. But with the help of MCP server, Salesforce has exposed this capability so that agent can use it without, going to Salesforce screen and clicking on new, or any system doing a call out to directly this create account endpoints like the custom API integration code. Okay, so with the MCP server, you have kind of, again, going back to our previous examples, you have just made sure that now you have a type C output point enabled in your system, so that any client with the type C charging cable can plug into that port. That's it. Okay, so that's what you're doing. So behind the scene here also API is working. So MCP is not going to eliminate the API. We need to remember that in many implementation, MCP will just be orchestrating, and behind the scene those APIs will only be working. The business logic is going to be same. The way a user creates an account is going to be the same way an agent will create the account. If there is a mandatory field which is not available, user will also get the error, and even the AI agent, if tries to create that, they will also get the error. Okay, so it is not going to bypass anything, it is not going to change the way business is working. Business logic also will stay same, API will stay same. Okay, what's new is that there will be a layer that allows AI to discover these capabilities and reason about them and use them without custom integration code. So if you ask me, can't cloud write a call out code to hit the endpoint create account? Yes, it can do that, but that will be the custom code. With the MCP server, they don't need to do anything. All they need to do is to just check if that particular capability is exposed as a tool on the MCP server or not. If it is, they don't need to do anything. Everything is already available. Every bridge is already available. All they need to do is to just walk on that bridge. Okay, so these are the major differences. I wanted to make sure that you understand these before going into the implementation part of MCP servers. And I also know that there will be many things which might not clear to you right now, because we are yet to see MCP working in the real example and the real execution part of it. So maybe just grab the main part from this video, and maybe once we complete all those demo and setting up part of MCP server, we can come back to this and again go through those differences. Then these differences will make more sense. But it was very important for me to clear this in the beginning, that they are not going to replace API. They are a bit different than API, but API is completely API will still be the heart of how the interaction happens between two systems. Okay, thank you everyone.